Marcus Reed had not slept in his own bed in 6 weeks. He stood in the doorway of the guest room on the second floor of the house he had designed himself, a 4-bedroom craftsman on a quiet lot in Kirkwood, and held a manila envelope containing a formal separation agreement. Downstairs, his wife was laughing into her phone. That laugh, once the warmest sound in his life, now landed like a door closing. He had hired the attorney on a Tuesday, signed the papers on a Thursday. All that remained was handing them over. But Marcus was an architect. He did not demolish structures without walking through them one final time. So instead of going downstairs, he sat on the edge of the guest bed and listened. Denise's voice carried up from the kitchen. Low and quick, the way she talked when she did not want to be overheard. He caught fragments. "I moved the money already." A pause. "He can't find out, not now." Another pause, longer. Then quieter. I know what happens if I stop." Marcus set the envelope on the nightstand. He pressed both palms flat against his knees and sat perfectly still, the way he sat when reviewing load calculations on a project that had started to feel wrong. Except this was not a building. This was 12 years. This was Jalen. This was the woman who had once driven 14 hours through the night to sit beside him at his mother's hospital bed without being asked. He had been telling himself for months that there was a reasonable explanation. That explanation had just evaporated. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, take a moment to subscribe. The stories on this channel are built for people who understand that love is complicated, that families are messy, and that the truth is almost never as simple as it first appears. Now, back to that hallway in Kirkwood. To understand how a man reaches the point of sitting in his own guest room holding separation papers, while his wife whispers about money on the phone one floor below, you have to go back 11 months. To the evening everything shifted so quietly that Marcus almost missed it. It was a Friday in late June. Marcus had just landed the Morrison project, a mixed-use development in Midtown that represented the largest commission of his career. His firm, Reed & Associates, had been shortlisted twice before and passed over both times. This one was his. He came home that evening carrying a bottle of wine he could finally justify buying, and found Denise sitting at the kitchen island with her phone face down on the counter and her eyes swollen. "Long day?" he asked. She smiled. But the smile arrived a beat too late, the way a translation arrives after the original has already been spoken. "Just tired. Congratulations, baby. I'm so proud of you." They celebrated. Jalen made a card. Denise cooked Marcus's favorite, shrimp and grits with andouille, the recipe she had learned from his mother. They sat at the table like a family that had everything it needed. And for that one night, they did. 2 weeks later, Marcus noticed the first withdrawal. He was reviewing the household account online, something he did casually once or twice a month, not out of suspicion, but out of the same habit that made him check structural specs 3 times before submitting. $3,200, transferred to an account he did not recognize. He assumed it was a mistake. He mentioned it to Denise that evening while clearing the dishes. "Oh," she said, not looking up from her phone. "That was for the roof repair deposit at the school. Booster club stuff. I'm handling it." He let it go. Denise had been the treasurer of Jalen's school booster club for 2 years. The number seemed high, but he trusted her. A month later, another withdrawal. $4,500. Then $2,800. Then, in September, $6,000 in a single transfer that left their savings account noticeably thinner than it should have been. Marcus said nothing the first 3 times. By the 4th, the architect in him had already started assembling a blueprint of what the structure actually looked like, and it did not match the one he had been told he was living in. Let's step outside the story for a moment. What Marcus was experiencing has a clinical name. Researchers call it betrayal blindness. It describes the phenomenon in which a person who depends on a relationship, emotionally, financially, or both, unconsciously avoids registering evidence of deception. Not because the signs are invisible, because seeing them clearly would threaten the very foundation the person's life is built on. The mind chooses not to see what the heart cannot yet afford to know. Marcus was not oblivious. He was a detail-oriented professional who noticed everything. But noticing and acknowledging are two very different cognitive acts. One is automatic. The other is a choice. And for months, Marcus chose not to cross that line. The distance between them grew in the small, domestic ways that are hardest to name and easiest to dismiss. Denise started staying late after school 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Parent conferences, she said. Curriculum meetings. When she came home, she went straight to the shower, then straight to bed, often before Marcus had finished putting Jalen down. She stopped asking about the Morrison project. She stopped commenting on the sketches he left on the drafting table in his home office, something she had done for years, not because she understood architecture, but because she understood him. The woman who had always been curious about his work had stopped being curious about anything that required her to sit still and be present in the room with him. He tried. He planned a weekend trip to Savannah. She canceled the morning of, said something had come up at school. He suggested couples dinner with their friends, the Washingtons. She said she wasn't feeling up to it. He asked her once, directly, sitting on the edge of their bed at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, while she scrolled her phone with her back to him. "Denise, are we okay?" She turned the phone screen off. "We're fine, Marcus. I'm just stretched thin. You know how the school year gets." He wanted to believe her. He almost did. But the account balances kept dropping, and the explanations kept arriving with that same half-second delay, and the distance between them kept widening in ways that no amount of patience could bridge. By October, Marcus had started sleeping in the guest room. Not because she asked him to, because lying beside someone who feels unreachable is its own kind of exhaustion, and he had run out of energy for it. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he was giving her space. What he was actually doing, though he would not have used this language at the time, was withdrawing. This is where a second psychological pattern enters the story, one that family therapists see constantly and that couples almost never recognize while they are inside it. The demand-withdraw cycle. One partner senses something wrong and begins to pursue answers. The other, overwhelmed by what they are hiding or unable to articulate what they are feeling, pulls further away. The pursuit intensifies the withdrawal. The withdrawal intensifies the pursuit, and the loop tightens until both people are so locked into their respective positions that the original issue, whatever it was, becomes almost irrelevant. The cycle itself becomes the crisis. Marcus was withdrawing. Denise was hiding. Both of them were responding to the other's behavior with the exact reaction that made the situation worse. And neither of them could see the loop because they were standing inside it. He called his mother. Miss Lorraine Reed had been a school principal for 31 years before retiring, and she approached every problem the same way. Listen completely, ask one question, and wait. Marcus told her everything. The withdrawals, the distance, the late nights, the feeling that the woman he had married had been slowly replaced by someone he no longer recognized. His mother listened all the way through. Then she asked her one question. "Have you asked her what she's afraid of?" Marcus paused. "I've asked her what's wrong." "That's not the same thing, baby." He knew she was right. He also knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent 11 months watching his marriage erode in slow motion, that he did not have the energy to keep asking questions that came back with the same non-answers. He loved Denise. He was also exhausted by Denise, and the distance between those two truths had become a space he no longer knew how to occupy. He contacted a lawyer the following week. "Has someone in your life ever gone quiet in a way that scared you? Not the comfortable quiet of two people who don't need to fill every silence. The other kind. The kind that feels like a wall going up one brick at a time. Tell me about it in the comments." Or just type "stayed" or "walked." The evening Marcus overheard the phone call, he did not confront Denise immediately. He went to his home office, closed the door, and sat at his drafting table in the dark. The Morrison Project blueprints were pinned to the wall in front of him. He could see their outlines in the streetlight coming through the window. Clean lines, logical structure, every beam placed where it needed to be, carrying exactly the load it was designed to carry. He thought about the phrase he used with his junior architects when a design started failing under stress. Find the load path. Trace where the weight is actually going, not where you think it should be going. The weight in this house was going somewhere he could not see. And the phrase Denise had used on the phone, "I know what happens if I stop," had landed with the particular gravity of a person describing something that was not optional. He did not sleep that night. The next morning, Saturday, he waited until Jalen left for basketball practice with the Washingtons' son. Then he sat down at the kitchen table across from Denise, who was grading essays with a cup of coffee she had not touched, and placed a single sheet of paper between them. A printout of their bank statements from the past 11 months. Every unexplained withdrawal highlighted in yellow. $31,000. Denise looked at the paper. Then she looked at Marcus. And the expression that crossed her face was not guilt. Not exactly. It was closer to relief. The terrible, collapsing relief of a person who has been holding a door shut with their entire body weight and has finally, physically, given out. She put both hands flat on the table, the way a person steadies themselves before saying something that will change the shape of a room. "It's Curtis," she said. Curtis, her younger brother, 34 years old, the one Marcus had watched cycle through 3 jobs in 2 years, always landing on his feet because Denise was there to catch him. The one who had borrowed $800 for car trouble the previous Thanksgiving and never mentioned it again. The one Marcus had specifically, clearly, directly told Denise he would no longer support financially after the 3rd loan that was never repaid. "Curtis owes money to people who are not patient," Denise said carefully. "He got into sports betting about 2 years ago. Small at first, then not small. He owes $47,000 to a man in College Park, and the interest has been compounding since January." Marcus sat very still. "They came to the school," Denise whispered. "In March. 2 men in a black SUV waited in the parking lot after dismissal and told me that if Curtis didn't pay, they would make sure my family understood the consequences. They knew Jalen's name. They knew what time his practice ended. They knew where we lived. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I've been making payments," she said, "every month. From our savings. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't go to the police because Curtis begged me not to. He said it would make things worse. And I couldn't tell you because I told you I was done with Curtis." She nodded, tears running now, steady and quiet. "You told me that if I kept enabling him, I was choosing him over our family. And I heard you, Marcus. I heard you. But when they said Jalen's name, I couldn't think about principles anymore. I could only think about keeping my son safe." Let's step outside the story here, because what Denise just described illuminates one of the most painful dynamics in family psychology. Clinicians call it the loyalty bind. It occurs when a person is caught between 2 competing attachments, both of which feel non-negotiable. Denise's loyalty to her brother, rooted in a childhood spent protecting him from an unstable home, collided directly with her loyalty to her husband and son. The bind is not a choice between right and wrong. It is a choice between 2 versions of right, each one carrying the threat of devastating loss. What makes the loyalty bind so destructive is that it forces secrecy. The person caught in the middle cannot fully honor both loyalties at once, so they begin managing information. They tell each side a different version of reality, not because they are dishonest by nature, but because honesty in any single direction feels like a betrayal in the other. Denise was not lying to Marcus because she did not love him. She was lying because she loved too many people at once and could not find a way to protect all of them with the truth. Marcus pushed back from the table, not dramatically, just enough to create a few inches of distance. The architect in him needed clearance to think. $31,000, he said, from our savings, without telling me. Yes, and Curtis. Where is Curtis right now? Denise's hands tightened on the edge of the table. He's staying with a friend in Macon. He changes locations every few weeks. He's scared, Marcus. He should be scared. He put his nephew in danger. I know. He put you in danger. I know. And you carried that alone for 11 months. Her voice broke. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you. He sat with that for a long moment, the weight of it pressing down on the table between them like a physical thing. His wife had been making payments to dangerous people from their family savings to protect their son from a threat created by her brother. She had done it in secret because she believed, based on conversations they had actually had, that telling Marcus would force him to choose between supporting her and enforcing the boundary he had already drawn. And she had been right to believe that. He had said exactly those words. The problem was not that Denise had hidden the truth. The problem was that she had hidden the truth because the truth, as she understood it, would have cost her the one person she needed most. She had been solving an impossible equation with the only variable she could control, herself. Marcus looked at his wife across the kitchen table and saw, for the first time in 11 months, not the woman who had been pulling away, but the woman who had been holding on with everything she had. To him, to Jalen, to a brother she could not save and could not abandon, all of it carried alone because she believed that was the price of keeping her family intact. Where does the debt stand now? He asked. She blinked. She had been expecting anger. She had prepared for anger. This calm, specific question from a man already shifting into problem-solving mode caught her off guard in a way that anger never could. 16,000 left. I've been paying $1,500 a month. Who is the man in College Park? His name is Dion. I've never met him. I make the payments through a Zelle account Curtis set up. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he stood up, walked around the table, and pulled a chair next to hers. Not across from her, beside her. He sat down close enough for their shoulders to touch. I am angry, he said quietly. I need you to know that. I am angry about the money. I am angry about the secrecy. I am angry that you made decisions about our family's safety without including me in those decisions. And I am angry at Curtis in a way I don't have words for right now. She nodded, tears falling onto the essays she had stopped pretending to grade. But I am also sitting here, and I am not going anywhere. Because whatever this is, it is ours to solve. Not yours, ours. He said that last word with the emphasis of a man who meant it structurally. They sat in the kitchen for 2 hours. She told him everything. The night in March when the men appeared at the school. The way her hands shook so badly. She could not drive home for 20 minutes afterward. The second visit, in May, when they left a note on her car windshield with their home address printed on it. The calls from Curtis, always late at night, always desperate, always ending with, please don't tell Marcus. The weight of waking up every morning and choosing, again and again, to carry it by herself. Marcus listened the way an architect listens to a structural report on a building that has been quietly failing. Not with judgment, with the focused, methodical attention of a man who needs to understand every point of failure before he can begin to design a repair. When she finished, he asked one more question. The one his mother had told him to ask months ago. What are you most afraid of right now? Denise looked at her hands for a long time. That you'll make me choose between you and Curtis, and that no matter which one I choose, I lose. That's not a choice I would ever ask you to make. She looked at him. What I am going to ask, he said, is that we handle this together. No more payments from our account without a plan we both agree on. No more secret phone calls. No more carrying threats by yourself. Curtis needs help that money alone cannot provide, and you need to stop being his rescue plan. Because it is destroying you, and it is not saving him. That night, after Jalen was asleep, Marcus made 2 phone calls. The first was to his mother. He told her the full truth, every piece of it, The debt, the threats, the payments, the 11 months of silence. Miss Lorraine listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Denise, remind me of your Aunt Roslyn," she said finally. "She spent 20 years trying to save your Uncle Bobby from himself, lost her house, lost her health, nearly lost her mind. Some people love so hard they forget that saving someone who won't save themselves is not love. It's a trap with a noble name." The second call was to Terence Washington, his closest friend and a criminal defense attorney. He explained the situation in broad terms, enough for Terence to assess the legal landscape without exposing more than necessary. Terence's advice was direct. Document everything. File a police report about the threats and get Curtis into a treatment program that included financial counseling. "The debt is the symptom," Terence said. "The gambling is the disease, and the threats are a crime, full stop. Your wife has been paying extortion money, Marcus. That is what this is." Sunday morning, Marcus took Jalen to get donuts. They sat in the car in the Krispy Kreme parking lot on Moreland Avenue, windows down, Atlanta spreading out in all directions under the kind of early spring sky that makes you believe problems are solvable. "Dad," Jalen said through a mouthful of glazed, "is everything okay with you and Mom?" Marcus looked at his son, 11 years old, already watchful in the way children become when they sense the adults around them are performing steadiness rather than feeling it. "Your mom and I have been going through a hard time," Marcus said, "but we're working on it together now. That's what matters." Jalen was quiet for a moment. "Then Uncle Curtis called Mom's phone last week when she was in the shower. I answered it. He sounded weird, like scared." A pause. "He asked me if I still had my birthday money. I told him yeah. He said he might need to borrow it." Marcus's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "I didn't give it to him," Jalen added quickly. "It felt wrong. It was wrong, son. And I'm proud of you for trusting that feeling." He drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. The silence that fills a car when a man is rearranging everything he thought he understood about his own household. That afternoon, Marcus sat Denise down again, told her what Jalen had said about the phone call, watched the color leave her face, watched her press both hands over her mouth, watched her shoulders begin to shake with the particular grief of a woman who has just realized that the circle of damage has reached her child. "He called Jalen," she whispered. "Oh God, he called our son." This was the moment the loyalty bind broke, not through argument, not through ultimatum, through the simple, devastating clarity of understanding that the person she had been protecting had extended his reach to the one person she would protect from anything, including herself. She picked up her phone. She called Curtis. Marcus sat beside her and listened. "I love you," Denise said into the phone, her voice steady in the way that voices become when a person has moved past fear into something harder and clearer. "I love you, and I have been trying to save you for 11 months, and I am done. You called my son, Curtis. You asked my child for money. That is where this ends." She told him about a residential treatment facility in Macon that Terence had identified, one with a gambling addiction program and transitional housing. She told him that Marcus would help cover the intake costs, but that there would be no more cash, no more Zelle, no more quiet rescues. Curtis argued, then begged, then went silent. "I'll think about it," he said, and hung up. It was not the answer she wanted, but it was the first honest conversation she had allowed herself to have with her brother in over a year, and when she set the phone down, something in her posture shifted. Her shoulders dropped an inch. Her breathing slowed. The physical change of a woman setting down a weight she had been carrying for so long that she had forgotten what her body felt like without it. The following Sunday, Marcus stood in front of the small congregation at Grace Fellowship Church on Glenwood Avenue. Pastor Elaine Mercer had invited him to speak, not a sermon, just a few honest words from a man willing to share what he had learned at some cost. He spoke simply. "I almost left my family," he said. "Not because I stopped loving my wife, because I stopped asking the right questions. I looked at the evidence and built a theory, the way I build everything, from the outside in. I measured the angles and checked the load paths and drew my conclusions without ever once asking the person standing right next to me what was actually going on. He paused. We are taught, especially the men in this room, that being strong means figuring things out on your own. That asking is weakness, that a good man provides answers, not questions. I am here to tell you that the most important thing I have done in the past 12 years of marriage was sit down at my kitchen table and ask my wife one question. Not, what are you hiding? Not, what did you do? Just, what are you afraid of? Denise sat in the third row, with Jalen pressed against her side. Miss Lorraine was at the end of the pew, upright and composed, one hand resting on her grandson's shoulder. The next months were not cinematic. They were ordinary in the way that genuine repair always is. Tuesday night counseling sessions with Pastor Elaine, who had a gift for asking the question that neither of them wanted to answer and then waiting patiently until they did. Saturday morning breakfasts that started quiet and slowly, week by week, got louder. Jalen doing homework at the kitchen counter again, instead of behind his closed bedroom door. Marcus restructured their finances with the same precision he brought to his architectural work. He consolidated the remaining debt, closed the secondary accounts Denise had been using to make payments, and set up a transparent system that both of them could access. He did this without making her feel surveilled, without making her feel punished. He handled it the way a man handles something he considers a shared problem, not a verdict. They reported the threats to the Atlanta Police Department. An investigator named Torres took their statements, reviewed the Zella records, and opened a case. The visits stopped. The notes stopped. The parking lot at Denise's school became, once again, just a parking lot. Curtis entered the treatment program in Macon in late April. He lasted 11 days before checking himself out. Then he went back. Then he left again. Then in June, he went back a third time and stayed. The counselor told Denise that the pattern was not unusual, that recovery from gambling addiction is rarely linear, that the fact that he kept returning was, in its own difficult way, a sign that something was taking hold. Family psychology offers a name for what the Reeds were building, though they would never have used the term themselves. Post-traumatic growth. It refers to the phenomenon in which individuals and families who have endured a serious crisis do not simply return to their previous baseline. They exceed it, not because the crisis was a gift, it was not, but because the process of surviving it together, of being forced to dismantle old patterns and rebuild with greater transparency, produces a structure that is more resilient than the original. Marcus knew this intuitively. As an architect, he understood that a foundation, repaired with full knowledge of where the failure occurred, does not go back to what it was. It becomes something different, something that has been tested and reinforced at the exact point where it once gave way. The strongest part of any structure is the joint that has been properly repaired, because that joint has been examined, understood, and rebuilt with intention. Their marriage was like that now. On a warm evening in early September, the Reeds hosted a backyard dinner at the Kirkwood house. The Washingtons came. Miss Lorraine brought her peach cobbler and unsolicited opinions about the state of the flower beds. Pastor Elaine arrived late and left early, but managed to eat 2 plates in between. Jalen and Terrence Washington's son argued passionately about whether the Falcons had any realistic chance this season, a debate that generated more heat than the grill. Denise stood at the kitchen window for a moment, watching the yard full of people she loved. Marcus came up behind her and set his chin on her shoulder the way he used to, back when touching each other was easy and automatic and required no thought at all. "This is good," she said quietly. "Yeah," he said. "This is good." Later that night, after the guests had gone and Jalen was asleep, and the house had settled into the particular stillness of a home that feels safe again, Marcus was locking the front door when his phone buzzed. A text from an unsaved number. "Marcus, this is Dion. I know your wife thinks the debt is settled. It's not. Curtis signed something before he went to Macon. Something Denise doesn't know about. You and I need to talk, alone. He read it twice. Set the phone face down on the counter. Stood in the quiet kitchen of the house he had designed and built and nearly walked away from, and felt the floor shift beneath him in a way that had nothing to do with the foundation. From the hallway, Denise's voice. Coming to bed? He looked toward the hallway. Then back at the phone. Yeah, he said. Be right there. He turned off the kitchen light. But he did not put the phone down. This story reminds us that the most destructive secrets in a family are not the ones born from cruelty. They are the ones born from love. The ones that begin with, I am protecting you, and end with, I have lost you. Tariq and Nyla learned this. Marcus and Denise are learning it now. And somewhere in your life, someone you love may be carrying something alone right now, not because they don't trust you, but because they love you too much to let you see them struggle. If this story moved you, tap like. If you want to see what happens when Marcus meets Dion, tap subscribe, because part 2 is coming, and it will test this family in ways none of them are ready for. Written from a human heart with AI's support. This story only hopes to send you a warm message. Kindness is never wasted, and even when the world feels harsh, there is always the light of justice and beautiful things quietly returning to those who are kind. Production team. Story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.